I was in a meeting this morning, and I'm grateful to have 26 years clean, and it had never occurred to me that God has to do a first step the same as I do. I was thinking that God is powerless over my choices, and so God has to do a first step with the whole human race. I guess God's first step would be something like, I admitted that I was powerless over the human race. Or in my particular case, he has to admit that he's powerless over my choices. And his life has become unmanageable. You know, I can make God's world unmanageable. Because even though God's will for me is good, if he forces his will on me, that's spiritual rape. And so all he can do is offer his will to me. And I get to choose God's will or not. And it perplexes me. I can't understand what God was thinking when he gave us free will. Because when he gave us free will, because he wanted us to choose him, he wanted us to receive his love and return it. Without free will, we would just be robots. He would wind us up, and we would do God's will, 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 do God's will. And then he'd have to wind us up again, do God's will, do God's will, do God's will, do God's will. But that's not how he made us. He made us with a free will. So that, and when he did that, he kind of rolled the dice, knowing that we had the choice, and that I have the free will to choose God's will, to receive God's love, and to live in God's love, and to share God's love, or to reject God's love, to refuse God's love, and to live in self-will. And my experience in recovery is self-will is poverty, and God's will is abundance. Self-will for me is addiction, and God's will is recovery. Self-will for me is isolation, and God's will is family and fellowship. And on and on and on. The duality of being human is that there is addiction and recovery. There's God's will and my will. There is death and life. So when I choose to get clean, I'm getting on the path of life. I'm choosing life. And I'm learning to choose God's will. And as long as I stay clean and choose life and learn to choose God's will, trust and hope and courage and forgiveness and life and relationship come into my life. But because I have free will, I can take my will back. And when I get in self-will, I'm choosing death, choosing to use, choosing dishonesty, choosing isolation, choosing my character defects. Because when I choose my own will, all I have is my character defects. When I choose God's will, all of the spiritual principles become available to me. And I'm able to live in God's will, praying only for the knowledge of his will and the power to carry it out. The power to love, the power to forgive myself and others, the power to trust, the power to change, the power to heal. But the reason that the power comes in the 11th step is because there's so much healing and adjustment and humility and acceptance that I have to learn, I get to learn as I work my way and live my way through the previous 10 steps.